Ruminations in the Modif was filmed over a 3-day period here in my studio in Johannesburg by Mike Donnelly and Patricia Romero. It explores the solo journeys of my life in the far-flung regions of the world and the explorations of an inner topography. I never knew that I wanted to be an artist. I drew from when I was very small. I had a small bunch of pencils apparently, and if one went missing, there was havoc in the household, and so I scribbled and drew since I was very small. So it was my way of being in the world. And it has continued to be my way of thinking and making sense of the world. So I suppose art has been central from that early stage in my life, right to the present. It has been a way of making my thoughts visible, and I suppose I'm really intrigued that we are the only species that produce two-dimensional images in some way to describe the world around us and our thoughts. So we've evolved numbers, pictograms, diagrams, letters, writing, and we translate this experience into two dimensions. And so those first pencils were the beginning of a lifelong process of drawing my way into the world, and that I haven't ever really painted. So I've been intrigued by the translation of thought through the eye, through the fine motor control onto a page. And so the line represents both time and observation. And so my output over many years has really been working with pastels on a bonded fiber fabric and producing very large-scale works which were some way of trying to look both internally at the mind's eye images. We tend to think you don't see anything with your eyes closed, but we do. We visualize, or you see many things at night when you dream and your eyes are not open. So it is this combination of drawing the internal world and then looking very accurately at the external world. And that has been a process in my life of combining mental abstraction with experiencing the visual world. And so art for me has been all-consuming. So for me, to be an artist has been, for me, the only way. I have always been very interested in architecture, but I was dyslexic, so my grasp of numbers was very limited, and I always say that my grade 2 teacher, Mrs. Wilson, beat me how to read, and so I didn't fit into a schooling system particularly well, and I eventually found my way through my schooling to engage with artists such as Cecil Scottness. We had, well, very early on, I spent time with Ulrich Schwanecker as a schoolboy, learning to paint watercolors and draw, and then finding in my high school years Cecil, and then Eduardo Villa, and particularly Esme Berman, the art critic, whose family I got to know very well. And so I created an alternate world to school, and it was the beginning of my artistic career. My parents, my sister and I were born in Pietermaritzburg. My parents were at an African teachers training college called Ndoleni, and that's where Elizabeth and I were born. And they were very involved with education, and in some ways trying to make sense of the country that we lived in. I think the nationalist government came in and started to interfere with education, and there was a missionary influence at Ndoleni, the training college, and my father said he didn't want to be involved with any of either of those two aspects. And so he eventually left and became a miner in Welkom, and those are some of my earliest experiences or memories of this rather desolate, dusty place in the flatness of the Free State. And but my parents were very much working people. My mother was a teacher, and we lived very frugally. And eventually, my father was pulled up out of the depths of Western Deep mine and said he had a degree and that he needed to be involved above ground, and spent most of his life after that in training and personnel, trying to do away with the wage gap, and also in a way, I suppose, really look at how race was in the way of both training and the development in our country. He was with Anglo-American up here in Johannesburg. My mother taught at the school that my sister and I attended here in Rivonia, and then she eventually lectured in the philosophy of education at Johannesburg College of Education. So they were really interesting parents to have. They were deeply interested in history, philosophy, education, archaeology, and so there was a deep sense of inquiry within our home, and an enormous amount of books which enabled us really to be exposed to kind of investigation and thinking about the world with many facets. Of home is always a complex one for all of us. You know, our home is the place that we come back to. It's where we sleep, but we always have to leave it to go out in the world. And so my home and my studio here in Rivonia are absolutely central to my life. I live in this beautiful space with a very long wall on which I draw with the moving drawing boards, And I am surrounded by a series of incredible sacred objects from many cultures that I've collected in my travels. And my life is or has been about travel, that I have always found that I come to new insights when I am in other cultures, because my preconceptions are always challenged. And so that has always been a very valuable part of my life, and my work in many ways chronicles those journeys. And people I'm away for very long periods, often in remote parts of the world, or in major cities, in New York and Paris and London and Tokyo. And people very often say, don't you get homesick? And the wonderful thing is that I think, having grown up in a family where I always knew my parents loved me, and in a home which is so defined and beautiful in terms of me having a space to work in, I do miss it to some degree, but I always feel as though I take my home with me, so that when I'm traveling or when I'm on long voyages or journeying, I am in the moment where I am, and I am happy to be there. And many people, when they're somewhere, they always want to be somewhere else. And for me, the great joy is just to be able to experience the moment in its intensity, and in some ways to translate it either into my sketchbook notebooks, which are descriptions in kind of shorthand, or otherwise sketches, which then eventually here in the studio start to take shape and the ideas become visual. For me, swimming has been a very important part of my life since I was young. I learned to swim here in Rivonia at the primary school, and it has enabled me to feel confident in water, and I learned to dive, and here on the East African coast, initially in Mozambique, and then diving in Zanzibar and in the Seychelles. But I suppose the most extensive diving that I've undertaken has been in Micronesia and in Polynesia on a number of expeditions where I have traveled with archaeologists, anthropologists, marine biologists and ornithologists. And so each day we would dive twice at least on very remote reefs, monitoring coral and fish, and just the experience of floating in a non-gravitational field with this unbelievable complexity and beauty in that underwater world, for me has been one of the great experiences of life. And it always saddens me when we do look out with the telescopes into deep space. Even in our own solar system, we see how Mars or Jupiter or any of our planets are very hostile places. They are not places where one would like to be on a sea of ammonia or be on, in these deeply cold places. And as we look out into the universe, it is quite barren. I mean, there's obviously place for life out there, but we spend our time looking outwards And as a species, we forget what an extraordinary planet we live on. And, you know, these experiences under the oceans, or in the presence of plants, or in forests, or sailing in the Pacific, or being on an uninhabited island in the Seychelles, where I've done quite a lot of work on North Island, being there with Russell Friedman and his family, who's a great naturalist, and looking at, you know, the structure of plants and at weather, and, you know, these things we take so for granted when we are here. But when you look out into these vast distances, one has to really understand the preciousness and the fragility of where we are. We hop into the water before sunrise at dawn and start swimming, watch the sunrise from the coast as we swim up along for about an hour, and just so extraordinary to be in that Indian Ocean and to walk back along a pristine beach. And I always say it's so special not to have to turn around, whereas in my pool at home I have to constantly turn around. To be able to swim for an hour and keep looking forward, watching the sun or the donkeys coming down the beach. And then at other times I've swum across Kealakekua Bay in Hawaii, where James Cook first arrived and was hailed as a god, and when he came back he was killed on the far shore. And so I've swum across from the temple platform across this amazing bay with the dolphins coming and playing alongside. So extraordinary experiences, or being with the whale sharks off the East African coast, these huge gentle creatures, or with the blue whales, the largest mammals on earth, off the Sri Lankan coast. And so to see these great living creatures in oceans around the world has always inspired me. And there are drawings which talk about these huge distances. There's a work called Transatlantic, which is about the flight from Johannesburg to New York, or I would draw on the flights from Johannesburg to Reunion Island, where I was working on a project on the rim of an active volcano called Piton de la Fournaise. And so I would draw all the way across and draw all the way back in my sketchbook notebook, and those became very long, thin blue drawings. So swimming and flying for me through that blueness has been very important. There's a work called Blue Void, which looks at that interaction between the air and water, and I suppose the meditative state that this experience of submersion in the waters gives. Yes, so my studio is a central part of my life, and in my travels over the last 20 years, many of them have been focused on a project where I have worked with a major team of astronomers that have been taking on one of the most ambitious projects, which is to map 2 square degrees of the universe. And the 2 square degree field is just below the constellation of Leo. And if you close one eye and you extend your arm, it's 3 thumbprints by 3 thumbprints. And in that, in that 2 square degree field, over the last 20 years, we've found 1.5 million new galaxies. And so the study has tried to look very deeply into this postage stamp-like size of the sky and analyze what is revealed layer upon layer as we look back to the center of the universe. So I've spent time with our land-based telescopes on Hawaii, on this 13,000 foot high volcano. I think it is 13,000 foot high volcano Mauna Kea on the Big Island, and on the rim of this volcano are many of the world's great observatories. And I meet with the team each year somewhere to look at the latest data and to share what I call my terrestrial view of what they are doing. They tend to live in a very, very abstract world, looking deeply out into space, and their mental focus is constantly there. So it's a very abstract world they're in, and they look so often at the detail that they don't understand the significance for our species in what they're doing. We, for the first time in human evolution and history, are able to look beyond the sun, beyond the glare of the sun and the moon, into these extreme regions out beyond our own galaxy into the universe. And so I spent time with them in Hawaii, at the Center for Astrophysics in Paris, at the Cosmic Dawn Center in Copenhagen, with the team sometimes in Denmark or otherwise Finland or Russia. And also because the team who developed the Subaru telescope on Hawaii are based in Japan, we spend time at the University of Kyoto or the University of Tokyo or the University of Matsuyama. So it's been remarkable to be with the team in these observatories, but then to come back to my own studio to translate this very abstract world beyond our terrestrial experience in the studio. And so I always say to the astronomers that my studio is my observatory, and so it is both looking out and at the same time looking in that actually forges the work that I do produce in trying to use the drawings to understand these great levels of abstraction. So I'm not, as an artist, I've never been interested in making pretty pictures. For me, I'm not creating commodity. I don't want a studio full of assistants. For me, the insight comes in the moment of making a mark on the surface and allowing an image to develop over a period of time, which is a layer of, which is a layer upon layer as we come to different insights, as I think the information comes into us, and it's what we call stacking. The image, one image gets laid upon another until you understand the complexity of this deep space. And I find within my own work, it is a matter of looking both intently at the external world and at the same time seeing how the external and the internal world overlap each other, what I call the translucent worlds, where the mental perception of the world is overlaid on what we see and vice versa. These experiences and the privilege of being able to see these amazingly remote places and to be with amazing scientists, paleoanthropologists like Donald Johanson, or with Edmundo Edwards traveling through Polynesia all the way out to Easter Island. you know, people with knowledge that are able to share their fascination with the world and the intelligence of our species does raise my sense of awareness, and I suppose gives me hope, because I am also deeply saddened by the aggressiveness of our species that has been with us right from very, very early on. It seems to be hardwired, and that the challenge really is to find ways of accepting each other. And as I said earlier, you know, the great quality of and starting to understand other ways of thinking, other cultures, that so it is not about the judgmental. I have always been wary of many of the world's great religions, because they have worked with guilt and with fear to keep people in line. And those are two of the most negative energies I think that there are. And so the sense of openness or acceptance of finding what makes other species or other groups of humanity work and think. And I think creativity so often has led to an aspirational quality in most societies, and has worked towards the good and the beautiful. And for me, that focus on understanding creativity in cultures across the world has been what has been so inspiring, and creates a sense of humility, because it is awesome to see the great works that have been produced from the Paleolithic period to this very moment. And so I always try to keep my eye on that. One can get despondent when looking at the political situation in which I grew up in, here in South Africa, under apartheid, and the sense of exclusion, and the continued sense of war which dominates our planet, even up to the present moment, in Palestine and Israel, and it just spills out again. And that despondency, you know, is enough to disempower one. So all I think each of us can do, and that I try to do, is to work as positively forward in the only way I know how to create as an artist, or curate, or teach. I've spent 37 years at the Wits University in the Fine Art Department, teaching, working with wonderful students, and you know, to see that growth in each of them of this creative spirit that one tries to nurture in each person. It's not like there are things that have to be learnt like some kind of curriculum. I think each person has their own curriculum, and one needs to be able to respect that and in some ways guide it. And so I think the joy of meeting people and being out in the world is that constant sense of adventure, be it of place or people or of consciousness, which in the end is what links us all.